Unexpected friends. It all began when I moved houses. I had lived with my parents for many years, and as my wife and I were expecting our third child, our home was becoming too small. My parents agreed to the move, though my mother was a bit sad at first because she would miss her grandchildren, my wife, and me. The new house wasn't far, just a few kilometers away, but my parents, who were older and still working, started visiting us less frequently. At first, they came 4 times a week, then only once a month. It was then that strange things began to happen. My name is Martin Ramirez. I'm from Cordoba, Argentina, and I work as a truck driver. It's a profession I learned from my father, who is now retired. I worked in the same company where he spent his entire career, and he was the first to be surprised when I began telling him what was happening to me. "Dad, you won't believe what happened on my last trip. I was at the company, ready to leave, when I suddenly smelled a very unusual floral perfume. I thought maybe a secretary had passed by, but I didn't see anyone. I didn't pay much attention to it, but when I tried to start the truck, the engine wouldn't turn over. Sebastian, the maintenance guy, checked the vehicle and found that the brakes were faulty. If the engine had started, I probably would have had an accident. My father was upset at first, but calmed down when he saw that, thanks to God, nothing serious had happened. However, on my next trip, something similar occurred. This time I was driving down a deserted road in the middle of the night. I smelled the flowers again and saw an elderly couple crossing the road in a deserted area. I braked to avoid hitting them and thought about offering them help. I got out of the truck, and just then, another truck coming from the opposite direction crossed a bridge that collapsed. The other driver died instantly. If I hadn't stopped for the elderly couple, it would have been me. My parents were incredulous when I told them this. My mother, in particular, looked at me in a strange way, as if she knew something I didn't. Strange things continued to happen. A few days later, I parked the truck to rest and make some coffee. An old car stopped in front of me, and 3 people got out: a pregnant woman and 2 men. We chatted for a while, and they asked me for coffee. While I was making the coffee, I heard their terrified screams. They ran to their car and left in a hurry. Later, I found out from the news that they were criminals who had robbed another traveler and were caught by the police shortly after fleeing from me. Something supernatural had saved me again. The events continued, always preceded by the smell of flowers. One day, a colleague, Jorge, told me he had seen me traveling with several different people, all with expressionless faces. I realized that these companions were spirits that I couldn't see. I went to talk to my mother, and she took me to her garden, where she had an altar dedicated to the souls in purgatory. She prayed to them every day for my protection. Since then, I have become devoted to the souls in purgatory, though I asked them not to show themselves to me. I learned that they can intercede for us, and my experience is proof of their power. The elderly couple who saved me from the bridge and the spirits who scared off the criminals were souls who came to my aid, thanks to my mother's prayers. I call them unexpected friends, though my mother prefers to call them friends from beyond. The strange experiences didn't end there. One day I was driving down a lonely road in the middle of the night. The sky was clear, but there was no moon, making the darkness more intense. Suddenly, the smell of flowers filled the cabin of my truck. I already knew what that aroma meant, so I started paying attention to anything unusual. In the distance, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. As I got closer, I saw a man in old-fashioned clothes, like from the early 20th century. He seemed disoriented and didn't move, so I braked sharply and got out of the truck. "Are you okay, sir?" I asked, but he didn't respond. He just looked at me with a vacant expression. As I tried to approach him, I felt a chill run down my spine. Then I saw another truck approaching quickly from the other side of the road. I didn't have time to react. The other truck passed right where I would have been if I hadn't braked. When I looked again, the man had disappeared. I got back into the truck and continued my journey, still trembling from what had just happened. That night, when I reached my destination, I called my mother and told her what had happened. She reminded me to always carry a blessed rosary and to keep praying to the souls in purgatory. Another terrifying experience happened a few weeks later. I was driving at night when I saw flashing lights in my rearview mirror. I thought it was the police, so I slowed down and pulled over. However, when the lights got closer, I realized there was no vehicle behind me. They were just lights floating in the air. Despite my fear, I stayed in the truck and watched as the lights moved around me, as if inspecting me. After a few minutes, they disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. Later, I learned that a fatal accident had occurred on that same road years ago, and that other drivers had seen the lights too. The most unsettling situation I experienced was when I picked up a hitchhiker. He was a young man who seemed lost and grateful for the ride. We chatted for a while, but I noticed his answers were vague and evasive. After a while, he fell silent and stared out the window. When I asked if he was okay, he didn't respond. When we reached his destination, I turned to say goodbye, but he was no longer in the seat. He had vanished without a trace. I felt a chill and searched the entire truck, but found no sign of him. When I told my mother, she said he might have been a restless soul seeking comfort. Since then, whenever I smell flowers, I know something unusual is going to happen. The souls in purgatory have become my guardians, protecting me from invisible dangers. I have learned not to fear them, but to thank them for their constant vigilance. Now, every time I go on a trip, I carry a small image of a saint and silently pray for protection and guidance. In summary, the souls in purgatory have played a crucial role in my life, saving me on more than one occasion. Their interventions have shown me that there are forces beyond our understanding that care for and protect us. I call them unexpected friends, though my mother prefers to call them friends from beyond. The Enigma of the Lonely Road. Throughout my career as a truck driver, I have experienced inexplicable events, paranormal occurrences, as they would say. They weren't many, nor were they as extreme as sometimes told, but all of them left an indelible mark on my memory. I haven't seen anything concrete, but I have felt presences, perceived unpleasant odors without an apparent source, and occasionally felt an unexpected touch on my body. Although this may not seem like much, those experiences were enough to freeze my blood and leave me praying never to go through something like that again. God knows how much we can bear and assigns our trials accordingly. I suppose I wasn't ready for something worse. I never wished to live through something more terrifying. With what I experienced, I had enough. However, life sometimes plays against us, and what we fear most eventually happens. This story is about one of those unfortunate events that I experienced in 2015 during one of my many trips through the inner roads of the province. My name is Javier Lopez. I am from Chile, currently 42 years old, and still driving trucks. This experience was the result of my own imprudence. I have always been extroverted and sociable, a virtue that I question today. Now, when I find myself parked on a lonely and dark road, I prefer to stay in my own space. It was a Tuesday. I left the city around midnight to reach my destination with the first rays of the sun. That particular route was a kind of shortcut, little traveled and unlit, surrounded by forests. Everyone preferred the main route, longer but better lit and safer. But I always chose the old road. I knew it like the back of my hand and never had any problems on it. However, it had been 3 months since I last traveled it, but that didn't bother me at all. It was 3:45 in the morning when I checked my cell phone. The connection came back in that area, and messages started coming in. That was the only thing I didn't like about that route. The connection was constantly lost. Among the messages, one from the owner of the company to which I was delivering the cargo caught my attention. We had agreed that he would wait for me at 7 in the morning at the warehouse, but now he said he wouldn't be there until 9. This annoyed me, since those extra 2 hours took away valuable time. I parked on the side of the road and tried to call him, but the connection wasn't enough. While thinking about what to do, I cursed a little. I decided to wait, so I took a chair from the cabin, grabbed my thermos, and sat down to drink some mate under the starry sky. Everything was going well until a man appeared. I was sitting a short distance from the truck door, which I had left open to ventilate. While pouring the mate, I saw a figure out of the corner of my eye. When I turned, I saw that it was a man. He stopped dead when he noticed that I had seen him. The first thing I thought of was my gun in the cabin, but I tried to stay calm. The man seemed to be of medium height and robust, although I couldn't see his features well. A few seconds passed, and as I thought more clearly, I supposed that if he had bad intentions, he would have approached more stealthily. By how he behaved, he seemed to be afraid. I decided to greet him by raising my hand. The man began to walk toward me, but with slow, hesitant steps. I don't understand how I was so stupid to feel compassion for him. I thought he would be a young man or an old man. As he approached, I started talking to him. This made him stop again, perhaps surprised by my greeting. He resumed his steps after a few seconds, showing that he was beginning to trust me. When he was close enough, I could see details that gave me a chill. He wore a shirt and pants, both dirty and worn. His face was equally dirty and seemed to be about 40 years old. I realized that his behavior was due to his situation. When he was a few meters from me, he stopped again. I asked him not to be afraid and offered him a mate. Only then did he approach, but when he was in front of me, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. His smell was unbearable, a stench of decomposition that made me instinctively step back. "Take it, friend, no shame. Have a mate," I said, trying to hide my repulsion. He didn't respond, he just stared at me, unblinking. The smell of decay intensified, and I had to cover my nose. This affected him as he took a step back. "No, it's okay, I apologize," I said, trying to ease the situation. But my words caused him to do something that deeply disturbed me. He began to unbutton his shirt, revealing putrid skin full of maggots and flies. He couldn't be a living man. He was a decomposing corpse. Panic took over me. I ran in the opposite direction, crossing the fence that divided the forest from the road. I ran like a madman, screaming in terror. The corpse kept appearing in front of me, in my path. I fell several times, and finally, in the middle of the forest, I found a tree with a rope. Hanging from the rope was the body of a man in an advanced state of decomposition, dressed just like the man who had been chasing me. I spent the rest of the day at the police station, who didn't believe me when I told them about the body. In the end, it was clarified that it was a missing local. According to the sheriff, his soul manifested to guide me to his body so it could be found. This is the first time I have made my experience public. Only my family and close friends knew about it. I wholeheartedly wish that soul is now resting in peace. But I pray to God that it never manifests to me again, because even if it's just to thank me, his harmless gesture would make me shiver in terror once more. The presence on the road. It was a Friday night in October, the early hours had fallen, and the atmosphere was calm compared to previous nights. I was passing through the last town before reaching my destination in the city. Despite everything seeming to be in order, I decided to pick up a young man hitchhiking by the roadside. When I slowed down, I had already passed him and had to stop further ahead, making the young man run towards me. His joy upon approaching the truck was evident. I had never picked anyone up from that place, but I had heard that people from that area were honest. "Hello, friend. Where are you headed?" I asked when he reached the door. "Good evening, sir. I'm going to the city. Thank you so much for stopping. At this hour, it's hard to find a taxi, and I need to get there as soon as possible," he responded as he got in. He said his name was Juan and told me he was going to the city to see his girlfriend, whose parents were out for a few hours. He wanted to take the opportunity to be alone with her. I smiled as I listened to his story, reminding me of my own youthful experiences. As we traveled the 20 minutes to the city, Juan wouldn't stop talking, laughing, and joking. Suddenly, a strange smell began to invade the cabin. The windows were open due to the heat, so I tried to convince myself that the bad smell was coming from outside. But when I noticed that Juan had fallen silent, I knew something was wrong. I turned to look at him, intending to keep the conversation going, and, ironically, I was about to mention the smell, hoping he would notice it too. But seeing the extreme fear on his face, I knew there was nothing more to do. I decided to remain silent, not knowing how to react. With pity, I asked what was wrong and if the smell bothered him. Not to worry that it sometimes happened, but I didn't know the cause. He didn't respond. Now and then I saw him slightly turn his head to look back, indicating that he had already noticed the situation. Finally, he spoke with a trembling voice, revealing the eerie situation. "There's someone sitting behind us. I don't think it's your companion," he stammered. If there's something good to rescue from that moment, it was Juan's courage in not asking to be let out immediately or screaming in fear. As soon as we reached the urban area where the lights illuminated the first houses, he spoke again to ask me to stop. Today, when I remember, I feel a lot of guilt. When the truck was already stopped, he quickly got out and I did the same, as I didn't want to stay alone inside. I tried to calm him, but it was useless. As soon as he set foot on the ground, he ran away without looking back. I was alone once more, sitting by the roadside. I took a pack of cigarettes out of my pocket and lit one to relax, praying that presence would leave and let me be. Occasionally, I looked towards the cabin, and there it was, sitting, as on previous occasions, horrifying, cadaverous, motionless, with those eyes fixed on mine. After about 20 minutes, the apparition vanished. I prayed and got back into the truck to continue my work. My name is Roberto Diaz. I'm from Cordoba, Argentina. Perhaps some find the beginning of my story confusing, but let me put you in context. It all started a few weeks earlier, in the mid-2010s. I was married to Sophia, the mother of my children. Our love had faded over the years. Eventually, we decided to separate when our children were old enough to understand. I moved to an apartment but never stopped caring for my children. I met Carolina, a wonderful woman who became my refuge. However, during a work trip, I began experiencing inexplicable events. One night I felt unusually weak and tired. I stopped at a service station and after dinner I felt better. But the symptoms returned when I resumed my journey. I decided to rest and parked by the roadside, falling asleep almost immediately. I woke up scared. The truck windows were fogged and I was covered in sweat. I had trouble breathing, but when I rolled down the window I recovered. The weather didn't justify this phenomenon. When I woke up again, I noticed a horrendous smell, like someone with poor oral hygiene. I saw handprints on the windows from the inside. Terrified, I turned my head to the right and saw a vapor appearing in the air. That invisible thing was sitting next to me. I got out, scared, and as I left the door open, the windows returned to normal. I smoked a cigarette, trying to understand what had happened. I saw hand marks on my stomach, moist and quickly disappearing. I felt an indescribable chill. When I arrived at my destination, the scare still dominated me, so on my way back home, the phenomenon repeated. The windows fogged up, and the repulsive breath returned. I turned my head and saw a corpse sitting in the air. The skin on its face was rotten, with yellow pus. The open mouth emitted breath, and I managed to park the truck and vomited from fear. Every muscle trembled. I looked back and saw the corpse staring at me horrifyingly, and I sat on the road until the apparition vanished. Oh. I decided to visit a healer who confirmed someone had cast a spell on me. We cleansed the truck, and the discomfort ceased. The healer said the person who did the work would leave my life. Weeks later, Carolina left, taking everything of value. I never understood why she did it, but I learned it's better to be alone than to trust someone who can destroy you. My children are my only company. I learned to value my life and protect myself from those who wish me harm, especially from the presence on the road.